Air, Mr. Mallon Khan. Thank you for being on the podcast, the Aristotle Full Throttle program today. I'm excited to have you,
Oh
man.
man, thanks for having me. Thank you for inviting me. It's I was saying earlier, it's like I watched this show, so it's like, oh, I got invited on the show I watch. Interesting.
That's the thing. We're a welcoming place here, and I know you personally, and we met
Hmm.
we met on set. You were working on creating. That's kind of like
Yeah.
that's the world in which we live. And tell me more about some of the creative projects that you've been working on. I know that you do a podcast.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm a bit all over the place. I'm one of these. There's a term for it now. There's a TED talk you can look up called multi-potentialite. It's just someone who's not a specialist. So you basically just do a bunch of different things. So right now I've been editing podcasts for this company called Bio Reset Medical. But before that, I was doing animation when I met you for full screen. And before that, I worked for a therapist as a voice actor. I did, the voice of 14 characters for kids animations.
That's
And
awesome.
then before that, I was a window designer in New York City. So I kind of been all over the place,
Did
doing
you
all
did
sorts
you
of
make some
everything from all arts.
did you put something in Macy's window ever?
No, 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 no. Nearby Macy's, it was for the Museum of Modern Art, so their design store off of Fifth Avenue or whatever.
Well, that's
So
that's
that
a
was
bit
fun
cooler.
times.
That's way
Yeah,
cooler.
yeah,
I
cool. Interesting stuff. Hawking products and making a lot of garbage is basically yeah. When you make these window designs and you change them out a lot, you make a lot of like refuse.
Right. That reminds me. I made a joke that didn't land for anybody, where I was like, you get ingredients. This may not relate directly, but sandwiches are just temporary. You make them to be destroyed. That's it's
It's like
like
a
you can
sandcastle of foods.
exactly you construct this design and immediately destroy it. That's that's what I feel
Right,
about
that's where you get
sandwiches.
the sand part from.
Exactly. And today we're talking about a really fun topic. Obviously, we talk about movies mostly on this channel, and it can veer into anything all over the place depending on how the discussion goes. But paradigm shifts in movies, movies that changed movies. What are some of those movies? What would be a movie that comes to mind when you think about it? Hey, Shy,
Well,
and to the
when
chat room.
I suggested this topic, and obviously the first thing that came to mind was The Matrix, and you chose it as the thumbnail. So, yeah, I think you got that. And it's not just movies that change movies, but they change kind of the population too. And I remember The Matrix in particular being that kind of like whoa
Yeah,
kind of movie that
literally.
everyone they even started
Whoa.
dressing differently. Everyone's dressing differently. In I was living in New York City at the time, and it was like everyone starts wearing more black.
Yeah,
It's
they start wearing
and those
sunglasses
those
with
shades.
no with no
Yeah,
sides to them.
exactly. Yeah, and it changed films as well. You have everything from filters that were being used to the special effects, obviously, and the tone and like the tone of films too changed.
Yeah,
There's a level of seriousness and like flashiness that came.
like Pulp Fiction do that as well. I feel like when Pulp Fiction came
Mhm.
out in around '94, there's a spread of years up until like '99 when The Matrix came out that it's
That's
events
so true.
happening and play some really cool music. And like the '90s was all about the movie soundtrack too. And
Mm,
enjoy your guitar in Central Park. I forget that
mm,
he's from New York as well. We're both from New York. You grew up in New York as well, right?
Yes, I did all parts of different. When I'm an immigrant, so I came to this country when I was 5, in '85, and I lived in the Bronx, and then moved down to Coney Island, and then different parts of Brooklyn and Queens from there. So,
Yeah.
and I moved to LA about 2 years ago, mostly for work. So, and for the weather, because
Yeah.
come on, it's beautiful every single day here. I feel sorry for my family; they're just complaining about how the heat wave out there right now, but it looks like we got a little bit of a nice sunny day there, Central Park guy.
Yeah, yeah. Enjoy your guitar playing. Mallon is also you're also a guitar player, multi hyphenate. That's what was it called? A multi potentialite.
Yeah, multi-potential. I actually have an interview for a company called Putty Like, which was founded by the person who gave that TED Talk. Different kind of creative pursuits, and you don't want
Yeah,
to just do one kind of thing. I mean, it's kind of been that way for careers for so long. We just kind of and it pays to be a specialist. You get really good. You hunker down. You know a lot about. they have that saying, master of none.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you spread yourself thin among disciplines. But at our age now, where you've been playing bass for a long time, and you are equally a great bass player who should be playing bass more often.
I know I should be playing. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Thank you for the kind words. Hi, Lori3040. Thank you for joining us over on Twitch. If you have any questions about movies that changed level of special effects extravaganza into like a really compelling story, was not that popular or achievable before then. I think everybody tried.
I think that they were going for like, they were trying to take Flash Gordon to the next level or something like that, and interestingly enough, that Star Wars kind of kept on going with that, right? Empire Strikes Back took it to another level. It's like they kept on outdoing themselves, and that whole summer blockbuster thing kept on going. Basically all these movies we're talking about that shifts the paradigms. They're trying to hit that level of success that Star Wars did. Yeah. So Jaws is another example. That's where the summer blockbuster comes in. The first Batman, I remember that was one of the first movies I remember seeing. Or maybe not the first. I think Masters of the Universe was probably the first movie I saw in a theater.
I saw
that. Of course, I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. I'm like, whoa, look what you could do. Now you look back and you're like, oh my god.
Yeah, that's a rough one.
Cash grab.
Yeah, that one is definitely a rough one. I remember seeing that because I was a big fan of the cartoon He-Man, and then with Masters of the Universe, I was like, this isn't anything like. No. Where's Orko? I can't even understand what's happening. Did that have?
What's that again?
Did they have Orko in that? Was like the little floaty guy with the red hat and the O on his chest?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. That was a miss. But they redeemed themselves with Ninja Turtles, right?
Yes.
They didn't let us down with that one. That one I remember seeing and was immediate like, yes. Yeah. This is the gritty Ninja Turtles I needed. No.
But it's funny because the Ninja Turtles movie, hey, Angie and O, welcome. She says hi to you as well, Mallon. Hello, Aristotle and Mallon. Thank you for joining us. Today we're talking about paradigm shifts movies that change everything. And yeah, I would say that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie somehow works. And I just rewatched it about a year and a half or 2 years ago. And it's still got a heart. I think that's what carries it over too.
It's because just like Star Wars, it was an indie film. It was like kind of, outside, they were taking a risk. They were like, okay, you make your turtle movie or whatever. And then it's like this badass movie. And then, of course, the second one is where they start commercializing it and making it for kids. And it's full of dumb jokes. I still love the second one. Don't get me wrong. But that's a different kind of movie altogether.
It's got the ninja rap in there.
Yeah, right. Vanilla Ice. That's the one way you take it to the next level, is put Vanilla Ice in there.
That's how you know this isn't marketing at all. It's Vanilla Ice's one hit wonder, and then the ninja rap was quite good. You've got a comment here, Mallon. Video Village says Mallon is hot. Great, cheers to that. Candyland.
Thank you.
But here, you don't
keep sending me compliments.
It's good.
But to bring it back to the Matrix era, there was another movie that I think was another perfectly for men. We have no great war. We have like to get at as well as this sort of middle era type. And I think it's also playing out when we start talking about toxic masculinity and what's happening. There's a lot of like anger, deep-seated anger in there, and I think Fight Club really kind of gave voice to that in some respects. Of course, there was a whole hipster fallout from that. Everyone wants to be like Tyler Durden, and then there's like an anarchist, middle, sort of detached aspect to that ideology as well. So, but David Fincher, he's a guy like Seven. That's one of those movies that are just like set another tone standard.
I love that.
Coincidentally,
Fincher does that. Yeah,
I remember with Seven, they filter to the DVD version or something like that because of the Matrix.
Really? After the fact, or
yeah. Wow. Yeah, I remember seeing that on a DVD, like how they color corrected the sky and everything, because it was like, I guess the early days of that stuff.
Right.
At least digital wise, I don't know.
That's awesome. I do love David Fincher. How you mentioned how he does do like the tone change, or at
Hmm.
least he a knife in the gut. Or even Alien 3.
Yeah.
If you think about Alien
Right.
3,
Yeah.
the much
A lot
maligned.
of people, yeah, a lot of people hate on that one, but I think the director's cut ended up being better, right? I haven't seen that in so long. I remember watching and going, okay, I see what happened here. Like a little too much in getting involved by the studio, or they're not understanding his message or his what he wanted to do with it. You know, it's like
Yeah,
what, just make another Aliens 2? You know, like no, it's a slightly different direction. You know. And a lot of people don't like the fourth Aliens movie too, but that's one that I kind of have a soft spot for.
oh
I
no.
recognize all
No.
the qualms with it. Yeah, I know, I get it, I get it.
Joss
I'm not
Whedon
gonna
wrote it.
defend it.
But which is still I can't
Really? I
figure
didn't
out.
know that.
Yeah, Joss Whedon wrote the screenplay for that, and I still can't figure out how it turned out that way. Ron Pertwee, hello, welcome guys. Very astutely that in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, they did not use their weapons. That is true. They don't use their weapons in
Oh,
combat. They just kind of use them hokily, and like is hokily even a word? But
it is now.
yeah, which was sad because they are literally ninjas. It's what they do. It wasn't real. Yeah.
And it strayed so far from the comic too. The original comic is gritty. That was how you describe it. It wasn't like, it's not for Saturday morning kids, you know.
Definitely not. The actual comic book was very bloody and very there were like people getting their heads chopped off and all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's the ninja part of the teenage and the mutant part.
Hmm.
Batman 89
Right.
was the first movie I saw in theaters, and it's uphill with me and DC from there. So Annalena is a big fan of the DC verse, which I feel like now speaking of paradigm changes, we didn't really get this shift in, I guess, I don't know what you want to call them, comic book adaptations, superhero movies, as people like to sort of minimalize them as. I'd say they're good movies that feature people with extraordinary powers. A lot of them are.
I like that.
But Marvel really kind of did it start, do you think, with the modern era of superhero movies, we'll call them for the sake of argument. But you've had the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, which I think sold, like, first Spider-Man made the most money ever. So I think people were like, oh, you can make money in this genre. This is definitely after Batman kind of legitimized it, but this is way after that. It's like 12 years or so after Batman 89 came out, 13 years. You got Spider-Man re-upping, and then I would say, would you say it was Spider-Man with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man or Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight that really kind of kicked us up a notch as
You
far
know,
as...
I definitely think, probably the momentum probably started with the first Superman, but by the time they got to Superman
Yeah.
4, it was the momentum had gone down. But yeah, and then Batman picks it back up, and then you have like a string of like hit or misses throughout there. Spawn, for instance.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I think Iron Man definitely solidified Marvel Studios' role in the way they were portraying it. But before that, another, I think, paradigm-shifting film as well, because Chris rated look, a less fantastic, less avant-garde
More grounded.
way of shooting things,
Yeah.
more cinematic and photographic. Citizen Kane, which did this is the guy, the giant spider guy, the producer who wants to like,
Oh yeah,
who ends up making
the John
yeah,
Peters story. Yeah.
There's a documentary. Yeah,
Oh, it's so good,
yeah.
guys.
It's wild.
What we're talking about? There's a documentary called "The Death of Superman: What Happened," or Superman Lives. I forget how it goes, the title, but it's a very long title.
Right, the Tim
Google
Burton
it.
project. Yeah.
The Tim Burton project. It's also a really for Tim Burton. And guys, Ron Pertwee in the paradigm
Oh
shift.
yeah, Blade. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally. That totally was like nobody saw that coming, and nobody expected it to like the particular look and its approach and style and the character, and Snipes nailed it,
Yeah.
But then, the studios took over and they injected whatever they wanted into it, and and then you
Yeah.
have Wesley Snipes locked in his trailer, smoking too much weed and like refusing to pay his tax.
David Letterman as Blade to promote Blade, which was, I thought at the
Yeah.
time, and I still kind of do, think it was amazing. I think that was kind of
Yeah.
a genius move. guys on Instagram, if the audio quality is a little grainy or bad, or it sounds like a phone call or whatever, you guys can always go to twitch.tv/Aristotle Full Throttle to hear everything crisp and clean with no caffeine. Well, actually, lots of caffeine. And also
out of my Ninja Turtles mug too.
Appropriately so. Yeah, guys, this is a great topic. There's lots of really good comments here in the chat room. Yes, it was called "The Death of Superman Lives: What Happened." That was the name of the movie, and it was by the late great John Schnepp, who recently died suddenly. Outlets, and he was a big contributor to that. And I was kind of following him over the years, him talking about making this movie, the death. He was like, I'm making this movie, and he finally collated it, all of the footage, all of the interviews, even interviews Tim Burton, and you can rewatch what was to be a bizarre Tim Burton movie, a Batman movie. But do you think Tim Burton, because he put such a stamp on Batman 1989, that he turned it into his own thing? He really did adapt the comic book through his own lens. And
yeah,
I think a lot of times when we were talking about Fincher's franchises, and sometimes it hits and sometimes it misses. So, like, for instance, as hokey as Batman and Robin is, it's definitely Joel Schumacher's vision of a ridiculous, but
it's hokey as it is. So I'm signing up to see him in whatever. He was great in Sonic. I watched the Sonic movie.
Oh, I want to see. I actually really want to see Sonic.
He delivered. He was fantastic. I loved it. I was cracking up.
We watched it. I loved it. He loved it. So I guess what
in a lot of ways it's what you'd expect, but like, they know, I think when they're making these movies that they have to inject something that's a little bit not expected, and Jim Carrey's the perfect injection of
he's definitely. I love Jim Carrey. I didn't realize how much I loved Jim Carrey until it was about 2002 or 2004. I saw like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and I was like, wow, this guy's a great actor. He's a really great actor. And then I kind of like went back in my head and I was like, I have seen every single Jim Carrey movie in the theater for the last 12 years, since like The Mask, since Ace Ventura. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, I must really love Jim Carrey. And it was weird because I wasn't
he's
aware.
Mesmerizing.
Yeah. He's mesmerizing,
and that's what all actors should be. I know he gets, separated as a comedic actor, but he's an actor. He's a spectacle. Once he gets in front of you, everyone's gonna look at him. That's an entertainer, pure and simple.
That is his talent for sure. I mean, I cannot get over how incredible some of just the subtlety. I mean, he's not very subtle. That's kind of his stamp. But
no, but it's very specific though. He hits a very specific. He knows how to use his body. I mean, that's physical humor 101. But then timing is just there. Everything is just there, and he's just like, he knows just how to use space to bring joy to people's face. It's a true gift to be able to light people up like that, Charlie Chaplin style.
Exactly.
That's a true gift.
We were talking about Charlie Chaplin on the episode with Ron Pertwee, who finally secured his copy of The Kid, which is great. I'm glad, Ron Pertwee, you were able to get that. But that's true. Now we can look back and look at Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, and look, Jim Carrey, even Jerry Lewis to an extent, is in that sort of that physical comedy lane. They each changed movies, and Jim Carrey, I think, changed movies because no matter how much the critics panned his acting, there was just no denying that the movies are wrapped around him. The movies that he's in are just wrapped around what he can physically do. Like The Mask, famously, the movie The Mask saved so much on special effects, like CG, because he could just contort and move his body in weird ways so that it was funny on camera and in camera, that they didn't have to do anything later, which is just really, really amazing. He's a funny guy. My favorite part, Dumb and Dumber, one of my favorite parts. He's walking out of 7-Eleven. He's like, hey, guys, big gulps, huh? All right, see you later. So good.
I love a good like those weird moments like that. You and I not too long actually when the pandemic first started, you and I watched Naked Gun together on Netflix Party. That was hilarious because we
Yes.
share our love for that kind of comedy.
Just pure gag comedy. Just stuff that you have to build an entire set, like we were talking earlier. Build it to destroy it. Build an entire set
Yeah.
just for one joke, just to sell one joke. We're gonna like, yeah, it's amazing.
It's the essence of dad jokes, man. Like I love dad jokes too, and like my wife is always rolling her eyes at it, and I said that's what fuels me. That's why I love it. It's when you roll your eyes but still smile. That's what gives me the fuel. That's why I keep telling the jokes.
I thrive on dad jokes. Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
I mean, I always say when people say dad jokes, I'm like, hey, if that's a dad jokes, then dads are hilarious.
Yeah. I'm a dad, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's go back to these comments here. Nick Cage would have been a horrible Superman, says Ron Pertee. Interesting. I don't know. I think it has to have the context, but Ron Pertee is very particular about Superman, as am I, about how he's portrayed, being sort of this beacon of light, and Zack Snyder kind of just hating the character. He's just not liking the character that he's working with, and that.
I think I'm looking forward to the Snyder cut because I want to see what his version of it, but other than the
yeah, me too.
Frankenstein version we got, whatever that was. But I think for Zack Snyder, he started seeing as because in a lot of ways, Superman is supposed to be truth, justice, the American way. It's supposed to be this ideal that I think maybe is hard to swallow nowadays. I think people gravitate more towards Batman nowadays because he's a more realistic, cynical outlook. And maybe I don't know if that's accurate. There's something to be said about if you look at the Christopher Nolan Batman films, the third one in particular, The Dark Knight Rises, there's a huge sort of dichotomy happening between the police officers and the criminals or Bane's people. So, and then Wall Street and something in the people's mindset. So, and what exactly and whether it's intended on purpose, whatever, that's up to conspiracy theorists. But nonetheless, it's happening. These films are so impactful to our lives, and they do shape the consciousness of eras. So when we start to wonder,
right.
like another paradigm shifting film, in fact, probably the first paradigm shifting film is Birth of a Nation.
Yes.
Right? And that was one of the biggest films of all time. Yet it is one of the most horrible pieces of cinema of all time.
Well, is that D.W. Griffith? I think.
I think so. I'm not sure who was behind that, but I'd seen it not too long ago for the first time, and I was just like, "Damn!" People watched this and they thought it was the shit,
Yeah.
So it takes movies to come back. Like The Matrix was created by someone who's transgender. It's like movies have back and forth as far as our culture is concerned. Artists just doing that, writers doing that. It's a cultural war. And maybe war is not the right word. Maybe conversation.
Yeah.
Heated conversation.
It is. There's like pressures and it's maybe a cultural growing period, which does take like a give and a take and a push and a pull, and hopefully it all bends toward justice, truth, justice in the American way.
Right.
That's what we need
so
right
it's
now.
the power of American military or something like that. Because it's sort of like, what do we do with this power that we have, this responsible power? Should it just be like you extent saying Nolan's world was using surveillance equipment to map all of Gotham City? So it's like
That's
which
true.
Batman is this?
And also, Tim Burton's Batman had those guns on his car, just blowing up buildings.
Exactly.
You're like, okay, well, I guess
or
there
the
is.
Polar bears. Wasn't there like some polar bears that were like?
Yeah, like he threw the guys to the circus polar bears, and there's all kinds of stuff where you're like, well, I guess there is a precedent that we sort of overlooked, but I guess I don't know. Snyder, I think he's just trying to push these characters into spots where it just makes us feel uncomfortable. I think it's like he'll always do what's right, and that's why you can have a Batman.
He has to stay like that. That's why you have to depict Superman like that. You can't
Yeah.
depict him another way. He's another character then, and it's part of the whole. What's that word for the they use for Greek mythology for all the gods? It's that I forget the name of it, but it's
Yeah.
the collection of all the archetypes
Pantheon,
working
I
together.
think.
Pantheon, right? Exactly. So we become more, it's
Yeah.
the beginnings of pulp comics, and because I researched this a bit because I wrote a novel called The Legend of Black Dove, and you can find it on Amazon. But I sort of went into the history of comic book heroes and and what they represented. And a lot of times they're always millionaires or billionaires who just are. That's one level of philanthropy, it's which is kind of a sketchy thing to begin with. But that's the discussion we're having, and I love. And personally, these archetypes have been played with a lot, so I'm flexible at seeing slightly different version of Batman. Let's see the Jim Lee version of Batman. Thought of to put them all in black, for instance.
Yeah.
But then once that happened, all of a sudden it's like, okay, Batman can be in black. He can be all in black.
Right.
He doesn't have to be blue and gray.
Blue and gray, yeah. And sometimes the punctual talking about like how things have changed like that over time. And you've got movies like I always like to go back to Citizen Kane. You mentioned 2 anymore. It's got so many little things that never happened before that movie. Just the way the opening shot is. They teach you this in film school. It's just you see a mansion off in the distance. It's a miniature, and there's a light on. There's a single light on, and we're moving in, and then it fades, and then the window that we're looking at is bigger, and then it fades, and now we're right next to the window. So there's this. We have to think about that now. We have to sort of deconstruct the language that we already know about film that was not there before that moment. Before Orson Welles had the genius at 25 to figure out how to portray traversing space and time. There's trucking shots. There's just angles, like that they use, like kind of low angle shots looking up at the hero to signify this strength and might. And just he established these conventions that are used in just about every film since, and before that didn't even exist. So stuff like that is got to be
medium, and that like you can tell stories. The character saying this is what's happening in the story right now. It's, but you're right in that. I think subtlety is lost. You don't.
Yeah.
So and it ends up being that there are symbolic filmmakers who are like work in symbolism and make very like weird, crazy sort of movies, and then there are people who are, communicating the story, which is taken, precedent. It's like what's happening. Who has the time in this industry to like sit there and work out every single shot to make sure that it takes some sort of crazy person like Orson Welles to like micromanage every single aspect of it, from the soundtrack to everything. But now productions are like, hundreds of people. Everyone's focused on one thing. You're having meetings. It's like
herding cats.
You're lucky that a movie gets like made at all. It's like a miracle. That anything that doesn't come out at the other end is like trash.
It's so crazy how like you and I have seen this. This is our livelihood. We see how a movie or any kind of production or like TV show that's orchestrated, a lot of times everyone gets there in the morning. No one even knows each other. And you've got to make this thing happen. You've got to bake a cake by the end of the day all together with all of your individual skills and stuff. And it is herding cats. It's just crazy. I just want to catch up on some of these comments here. So Annalita and Ron Pertee are having a lively discussion about Zack Snyder and Superman. Let's see. But by telling Superman not to save people is so out of character. Yes, I agree with that, Ron Pertee. That's the Zack Snyderverse, is just Superman allowing people to die all around him, which I cannot even understand that version of Superman. But
libertarianism, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, just fend for yourself while Superman destroys the city he loves. Ron Pertee says
he thought Superman was too much of a socialist. I think that's what it is. Like, you can't just help everybody. People.
He's like, Superman's like, I'm gonna be over here breaking. Ron Pertee says, because I grew up with Superman as a beacon of hope and light, the person who is always gonna be there to save the day and do what's right. When I see him being moody and all emo, it kind of bugs me. Yes, Ron Pertee. I share that feeling. I think a lot of people
Richard Pryor.
Richard Pryor. They make the synthetic kryptonite, so it doesn't have.
Mm-hmm.
He just puts like a random ingredient in there, and then Superman doesn't really get affected until he gradually gets affected. It doesn't hurt him, but he just turns
Mm-hmm.
bad. Like his
Mm-hmm.
it decays his moral essence, which I thought was brilliant, because we got to see that version of Superman, but also we also got to see the good Superman rise up within and literally fight himself. Tones of those Supermans, and then you had Superman 4, which was terrible.
Nuclear Man with his nails, his scratchy nails, his gold nails.
Yeah, I was like, that's his power? Is he scratches Superman? They're fighting on the moon, and they're just like kind of like they're doing the fight from They Live, basically. The fight between Keith David and Rowdy Roddy Piper. It's the same fight. Except it's not as good. Oh boy. What are some
them here? But let's see. I'll look back at my DVDs here.
What I had the Matrix.
Well, since we I've been watching. This is not a movie, but I've been watching Star Trek, the TV series, like the Next
CBS
Generation.
one?
No, actually, the original one's on Netflix. So not the original one, but the '90s era's one. So the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. I watched these when I was a kid, and the latest Star Trek series, because they've like it's obviously a whole different group of people. But Gene Roddenberry, I think when he started the Next Generation, one of the things he did was he wanted all these characters in the show to be great humans. They're exemplary, or at least that's what out of going, okay, let's get rid of the interpersonal nonsense and whatever. Let's pretend like these people got over that, and they're fully focused on exploring and being good engineers or whatever it is that their role is. That they're centuries now, it's pretty standard set of virtues.
Yeah.
So like, it's great to have that embodied, but then something going on, growth to too. When you consider they're talking about races, and it's like, how does that translate to human races? Let's not talk about it. Right. but I think they were pretty progressive, especially in the '90s. They were trying to, they had black cast members. They had topics that ranged from like Native American, I think, for TV. But it's interesting to parallel it with how Picard looks nowadays, very high energy. And I think it's like you notice that change happened with around Battlestar Galactica when that TV show came back. There's a change happened along with movies as well, of like the stakes being higher, the drama everything being a little serious, more serious, less colorful, dark.
Yeah, more shiny,
now
polished, dark.
Too, it's like principal photography look a little nicer. Technology is just like it does in social change. Technology does, I think, in art and especially movies and stuff. I think that determines how we tell our stories as well. Like I imagine that in the future, movies will be not two-dimensional anymore. They'll be three-dimensional, and similar to way open world games are nowadays,
right? Or
VR games or something like that. So imagine best, old releases and try to bring them into this new medium. So imagine if they took like, I don't know, Total Recall or something, and then they redid the movie somehow where it looks just like, a high-res best of graphics video game, basically like real life, like the movie, but now it's three-dimensional and you're in the scenes along as it's happening. So the movie's happening, Quaid's moving along, you can follow him if you want, you can be actor, you can replace Arnold Schwarzenegger with like Sylvester Stallone or something like that and see how that movie plays out, because it'll have like how director's view of reality. You're going to be co-creating the reality by deciding where you want to be in the scene, which is an interesting thing.
I really, as far as that goes, and I feel like it's been hard for the one particular way of, like Orson Welles did, invent a series of conventions that we are now so used to that it's just part of the lexicon of how we view movies. There's got to be a new way that that VR can establish that, and it still hasn't really taken yet, just because of, I don't know, if like the expensiveness of getting VR gear or whatever, but also was very dark and very Zack Snydery, and then Zack Snyder had to leave, and then Joss Whedon jumped on to take over. They brightened up all the colors of of the Unite the Seven posters, which I don't. That never was answered. Maybe
I think he probably will to keep it in his Batman versus Superman world. But yeah, I totally agree. His movies were so dark. It was just so. Even Watchmen, which I liked, was just like so. Okay, come on, trend. I think cool. Yeah, it's realistic. That's how darkness is. But you're also communicating something to an audience right now. So like, we don't want to miss it.
Movies tend to do that, where like, for instance, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, everyone's favorite. There, when he's literally underground at night, and I don't even think they have a light source, but they're still somehow able to navigate a cave underground at night. I'm like, all right, well, okay. We'll and Alita agree on, and like that opened up a whole realm of saying, hey, you can make your own damn movies and make them classics. With really no budget, just a camera and an imagination. And that the late 70s, early 80s, especially the 90s, I think, showed that you can do that with like Clerks. Clerks was kind of
because of post-COVID kind of restrictions. To try to make a movie with a set with a bunch of people, it's going to be really a nightmare now. So like there's going to be a lot of in place. They're just in two different green screens and just put together.
Right.
I think there's going to be more of that in the future. But as far as the technology is going to, as far as exchanging of data and whatnot is going to ramp up, and then the technology they use based on that, now that they have this ability to communicate faster, 100 times faster, and the quantum computing as well is going to create all sorts of possibilities. So lots of crazy stuff in the future. And, it's, and all our sort of practical skills I think they'll still be needed in 2012, which is about, and now Elon Musk is creating this thing called Neuralink, which is the same kind of thing I wrote about in my book, which is a post-iPhone sort of smartphone technology that you inject or you have put inside your brain.
Wow.
And it communicates with it. So now it's actually happening in real life. It's like, oh my God. So, excuse me.
No worries.
Yeah, so it's interesting times to see. I think Elon Musk is trying to stream music directly to your brain. I don't know about that. But interesting times yet. And imagine how movies are going to be when they're streamed directly to your brain. Hey, maybe we're already doing that.
Yeah.
This movie sucks.
Good golly. Yeah. It's like, now I got to sit
Who
here
directed this?
for the next 2.5 seconds while I comprehend this movie. The entire... That's we're going to be able to like digest information so quickly. Like right now, I noticed... I bring this up because on YouTube, the app on my phone, I know that they've had this feature on Android devices, but my iPhone now, you can shift the speed to 1.25, 1.5, just like podcasts, you can kind of speed them up. So now I devour 10-minute videos in 5 minutes. So now I'm watching twice as much content.
What does that say about us? Like, at first I'm thinking like, oh, I need to hear it faster, or these people are talking too slow. And it's like, maybe I'm just like impatient and I want the words just injected into me. Like,
now
like
Elon Musk.
Like I know Kung Fu,
Exactly.
Jacked in the back, I want to learn Kung Fu now.
I know that's
which is it's as a person who's grown up in the analog world, let's call it, like that's something you just have to go through as a process of learning things and growing pains and sit there and learn the thing. So that it's kind of sad that kind of patience, that level of patience is eroding very quickly in the face of an era where everything is instantly delivered to you. So there are people being born right now who have no other basis for understanding of it. It's just instant gratification, and if it doesn't get instant, it's like, well, what are you wasting my time for? And that goes hand in hand probably with the subtlety of the discussion we had earlier about like, well, they don't got time for subtlety. Tell me the point. What's the plot? I need to know what the plot is. Who's going to happen? Who, what, when, where, why?
Exactly. I watch movies like that. I just recently watched a movie called Dark Skies. It was on Netflix. They were like, you might like this movie because you like alien stuff. And I was like, yeah, let me try it. And I watched the whole movie. And I was like, no, you didn't have to do that. You could have got to this part. Why? We're at the midpoint and we just learned what the heck's going on. Why are we taking so long? I was so impatient with the plot because movies are just different now. Movies and the way we watch movies is so different than like when we were kids. There was a little bit more allowance for things to unfold slowly. Now we got to be like in the action, go. We need to learn things quicker as things go.
Then you have people who know this, they recognize it, and then they're adjusting to it. I think Jordan Peele is someone like that. He puts on your screen. David Lynch was probably one of the pioneers of this, but putting something on your screen that you have no idea what's going on, and your only option is to listen and find out. And see how it plays out. And if they can keep your attention by constantly changing it or making it more interesting or stepping outside of normalcy and making it less predictable. But then again, who comes up with that? And how do you do it without making it look stupid or forced or whatever? So then you need these, I'll still upholding what's that, captures my attention, like, from scene one.
Indeed. That's, and I want to talk about some filmmakers who are continuing in that tradition, or at least trying to maintain a language of film. Though I want to catch up / Aristotle between Ron Pertwee and Ann Aletta about the Superman universe. I live in Wisconsin. There was no island like Michigan with palm trees, and Snyder is talking about over here. Just try to catch. You guys have any questions or any cinema? I think direct movies are hanging on the edge right now of Tenet. People are seeing whether or not Tenet, Christopher Nolan's next movie, is going to come bring people back out during a pandemic, which is, it's going to see how we're going to watch movies now, because I think there's going to be streaming options. There's going to be other options. I personally love watching Christopher Nolan movies in theater because the way he shoots them very specifically for that format. He will shoot in IMAX for sections of his movies, and he's very cognizant of the scale at which he creates his movies. And the one thing I would say about Christopher Nolan, and you can't really say this about any other modern director, is that we will go see a Christopher Nolan blockbuster movie that's not based on any pre-existing material, which is Tenet. Like, what is
true.
that? Interstellar, what is that?
Right,
Inception,
right.
What is that? I'll see it. It looks cool. Somehow he's able to get us in that theater. Yet most other massive movies are based on some other pre-existing material. Who do you think? Like,
I think some people just have there's with him in particular, there's a visual language and an ideology, I think, that visual ideology, maybe, if you want to call it, that goes along with it. And I know he's exploring topics in particular with these films. He's sort of telling a trilogy of his own, that they're not in the same universe, a filmmaker together. But I think he's one humanity. I think another one is James Cameron. We didn't mention Avatar as being that. And as an animation guy, I'll say that, like, animation in particular, whether it starts with Snow White or Toy Story or Avatar, takes storytelling to another level. The Disney movies in the 90s too, the Aladdin and Lion King and such, there's a level of storytelling there, and that just transcends, human real life, that the audience just takes it. Okay, I'm in cartoon world. I'm signed up for it. And you can really see this when they translate these things to real life. When they make Aladdin and Lion King and more or less live action, you see what the value of animation there as far as communicating emotion. Yeah, it doesn't look like a human being, but by making their eyes a certain way or like this, you get a multitude of a communication of ideas exaggerated. Whereas when you show that on a CG lion, it's not quite as it's not coming through as strongly. So the animation too, I just wanted to bring up, is I think one of those important communication tools.
An animator.
Yeah. Yep. And it gets into the Toy Story or animations like that. The level of, like, emotional communication on these there's like just a slight little darting of the eyes or flaring of the nostrils, whatever. It's like beautiful work. These people are sculpting not just the model of a person, but sculpting an emotion playing out in real life in an extremely, I remember bawling the first time I saw Up, because, as a person who's been with my wife for a long time, it's like, oh, I'm going to grow old and die. It's like really touched me, and it communicated all that visually through, like, little cartoon squat characters. So beautiful. Like, animation opens up so many things. Like, if you want to get an idea of what that VR filmmaking would be like, play an open world video game. You know, it's not quite as immersive and realistic, and you have to get over the interface of the controller, but the story is playing out around you. You know, things are happening. You're playing a role in it. You're not just watching a shootout play out in cuts and screen. You're like watching the car like in real time. It's like being there in person, you know.
Right.
So and who knows what kind of effects that's going to have on people. If you know, people are getting bored of movies now. Once they become super immersive, you might have people having heart attacks during watching a movie.
Right. And it might not be an uncommon occurrence, actually.
Right.
It might be like, oh, yeah, he died playing the new Fortnite inside the Fortnite.
The graphics are too nice, man. What can I say?
But that's what I used to game a lot, like way back in the like Xbox OG days, like the mid 2000s. I was gaming, but then I was like, you know, I got to put this down for a while because it's just of life. And then I was like, you know, I really do want to get back into gaming when it becomes fully immersive, when I can wear a helmet and I could be running around, like physically, like jumping and running and fighting and doing all those things. And
Yeah.
I think I mean, I've seen rigs where they like suspend you in one spot and they give you these special slippers that you could you could be running on a slippery surface. But again, people might be over exhausting themselves, like that kid a few years ago who died from dehydration because he was playing for like 48 hours straight. He died of exhaustion and
Yeah,
dehydration.
that's a serious problem. I mean, you know, and you know, that's I have the same thing with video games. It's like, you know, I put them aside. I have go, okay, if I'm gonna spend lots of hours on this video game, so let me save it for a time when I've done a ton of work, and now I'm like, okay, I need to shut off my brain for a while. Let me play a video game, and then that I can kind of just absorb the art. Like, for instance, Witcher, that series came out on Netflix, and I was a big fan of the video game because it's just an amazing piece of artwork, or piece of work in general. Just the everything from the story.
I just want to tell the folks on Instagram, guys, if you guys are still watching on Instagram, we've got about 25 seconds left. If you want to keep watching, go over to twitch.tv/Aristotle Full Throttle, and you can see and hear all the discussion there. Otherwise, I will see you guys on Instagram tomorrow. The discussion continues over at twitch.tv/Aristotle Full Throttle. So you were saying?
What was I saying?
You just...
I forgot now.
Totally joking. It was about like dying playing video games.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, video games. I think we were talking about, and yeah, like making time for it and whether. But Witcher in particular was like a great video games. It's, you know, the story, there's cinematography in the cutscenes. There's like, you know, there's the level design, the immersion. You know, there's just so many things to appreciate about them. But then there's other games where it's just, you know, headshots and, you know, like so it's like video games is definitely a wide art form filled with all sorts of games that are just designed to hijack your reward system in your brain. There's definitely tons of those, and then there are other ones that are like, you know, people who have been fans for video games since they were invented, like put their heart and soul into making something like truly incredible. That's not just like a, you know, exploitation or something.
There's an incredible indie game documentary. I forget what it's called. Indie game documentary. I'm going to look it up because it's really great, and it shows like the blood, sweat, and tears that go into creating indie games that these developers just spend their lives just working on
hours and hours. Coding, man, it's no joke, man.
Yeah,
you spend a lot of times. Yeah, spend a lot of time in front of a computer. The same thing with animation too. 3D animation is like, animators got it rough. It's a rough industry as well, and you know, because they get worked for hours. And when something like that Sonic travesty happened, it falls on the animators to have to fix that. Like, oh, you don't like Sonic? Okay, that means that we're going to be working Saturdays and Sundays for a while. You know?
Yeah.
It's so like. It's quite but it's an amazing art form because you know, as an artist too, like, you know, I started drawing comic books when I was like 5 years old, and then now to be able to sculpt something in 3D and like, or to make a 3D animation and add atmosphere and weather and gravity to something and just see how it plays out, and
Right.
be co-creating this thing with somewhat with the AI and or algorithms or whatever. So it's interesting stuff, and like as a storyteller too, it just gives you too many options of how to tell a story, and I'm excited for the future. I know I keep saying that, but I'm
Yeah.
excited to see how film gets made in the future and how stories get told in the future.
That's really that's cool because then you can sort of develop your own unique voice in that world of limitless options. You're like, this is my style that I'm, you only ever see the moment or a period of an artist's work. You only ever we're only ever observing a moment in any artist. Like when we look at Picasso, we're like, this is what he did when he was 14. This is what he did when he was 22. This is what he did when he was 80. So it's like we see these I don't even know if he lived to 80, but but we see these moments. We're only ever seeing these slivers of what. And same thing with musicians. Like their albums are kind of a snapshot of that period of creativity. Same thing with musicians. Like their albums are kind of a snapshot of that period of creativity, and then we move on to the next thing, and we see where they're at, and they develop. They get new tools. Musicians get new tools all the time to create, and it's always fun to see how people use those uniquely. I wanted to mention also how I feel like we're in a world where gaming itself is just it's gaming is king. Movies are second. I think gaming is what it's a huge event for so many people, more so than a movie premiere, and it's crazy that how gaming styles have now integrated themselves into cinema. So I think that that's like the latest change, and even TV. So for instance, if you're watching The Mandalorian, you've got Carl Weathers shows up and there's a few episodes where he shows up and he's like, Mando, here is your next mission, and it feels like a cutscene.
Yeah,
where you're like okay, this is
Absolutely.
between levels. Now we know what our mission is for this level, and now Mando is going to go execute the open world.
Absolutely,
Game.
totally. It's a MacGuffin, find the
Yeah.
MacGuffin thing. I mean, there's all these like tropes in writing too, I think, that are, crossing genres or crossing mediums rather. So yeah, the writers in video games are using similar writing tropes as the ones in making do. It was like when I saw a movie was to imagine what the video game was going to look like and how I'd love to play this level of the video game. Never worked out though. Like, you see the Batman movie and then the Batman video game for Nintendo was like completely different. So it's okay, there's a similarity here, but it's not like clearly there's two different teams. There's not a lot of cross-pollination.
It's like the ET video game being the worst video game ever. The worst video game ever. They had to bury it. Bury it, literally.
Under like a Pizza Hut or something, right?
It was crazy. It was a crazy legend that it was buried underground, and there's also a documentary on that, which I forget, it might have been. Yeah. But yeah, check out Indie Gamer and whatnot. But yeah, like the way Indie Game the movie, I think that's what it's called. Yeah. But the way we tell stories now, the way that we watch movies, for instance, you bring up like, I wonder what the video game's going to look like, and Star Wars Episode 9. That was a freaking video game of fetch quests, and you're just like, I can't. I love me some Star Wars. We kind of started off talking a little bit about Star Wars, but Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, it's just a horrible, it's like a smattering of, it's just a vomitous wreck. I can't explain.
It's something so huge, and like, it loses all its purity by the time it gets to this level. I mean, there's no comparison, right? What is the comparison to Star Wars? It's its own thing. You have the Dune story. There's the David Lynch version, there's the TV series, and then there's the upcoming version. But it doesn't have a chance to really get outrageous, or there's always a sort of like, okay, let's try it again. With Star Wars, it's like, okay, what's the story doing now? And it has to. It's almost like a civilization. With every generation of a civilization, it has to incorporate some of the last. So every Star Wars movie it's actually all the Star Wars movies wrapped in other Star Wars movies because its level of self-awareness and meta-awareness of
Yeah.
itself and self-consciousness of itself and injecting into its own storyline its self-awareness. That's the kind of stuff that's happening with that can only
Yeah.
happen with a movie that big. And I think maybe Marvel's getting close. I don't know. Maybe it
There's
hasn't.
so
They
many
haven't
Easter eggs. Yeah.
spoiled. There's plenty of Easter eggs, but they haven't spoiled their own mythos yet. We'll see what happens now in the next
Yeah.
sort of phase of Marvel. Now that they've kind of exhausted everything that's happened there. But I think the same thing with Star Wars is. But there's a monkey wrench in the Star Wars thing in the form of George Lucas. He's because in the first series, right, in the first one, he has total control, and then he loses control for a bit. But then when the prequels come around, now he has control again. So, and we talked earlier about auteurs or whatever, or storytellers doing it their way. He broke all the rules. I mean, like
Yep.
it's mostly about trade federations and like some boring ass shit. So like, but again,
It's
for him,
kids.
he's serving
It's for kids.
he's serving some other higher story in his mind too. I think everything is
Yeah.
a metaphor for something, and it's like he can't help but do that. So I think there's that. So, but by the time he gets pushed out, and all these other people are jumping into the Star Wars thing, it's purely an aesthetic. It's what Baudrillard
Yes.
would call the copy of the copy of the copy. It's
Yeah.
it's
Also,
no
Nine Inch
longer
Nails would call that
yeah.
copy.
Good song, good
Copy of
song.
it. Yeah.
But that's like totally what it ends up being is like what is Star Wars anymore? It's an aesthetic. It's a space western, right?
Yeah.
I mean even its inception is pastiche as
Wow.
they would call
Inception.
it. It's taking Kawasa, what's his name?
Kurosawa.
Yeah. Taking that stuff, the westerns, the those kind of movies as well, and kind of rejiggering it along with the sci-fi stuff from the 50s or whatever. So you're getting that's pastiche to the end. So now we have Star Wars pastiche. It's like Star Wars copy of a copy of a copy. It's just it looks like Star Wars. It smells like Star Wars.
Yeah,
but
it's just so cannibalized. And
it's his own thing. It's like they've taken the skin of every piece of Star Wars and pasted it together into this monster. Just write a new story. That's why the Mandalorian, I think did so good because it's like finally a different kind of story. Still has the same aesthetic, still the same thing, but so much simpler.
Yeah.
So much simpler. You're not going from this planet to that planet and this person to that person, introducing this new character and then forgetting them in two movies later. Instead, it's just one character, one scenario, one situation, and like it's like a breath of fresh air. You're like, oh, storytelling. I can understand what's going on now. I can sympathize wholly with this character because I don't have to spread my sympathy amongst like 7 different characters. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well said.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's so true, and well said and well stated. Like, and I think Star Wars is such a great example of George Lucas changing the game every time. Like, so you had Star Wars change the game, special effects and a story and it's fantasy and space and all of these elements that just all combined, and you're like, what is this? And then you even had Empire Strikes Back, and he's like, well, this is going to be an indie film. I'm gonna literally make this movie with my own money now that I made all the money with Star Wars, and I'm gonna throw the biggest curveball in cinematic history at you right at the end, which was like another precedent that he set. Mm-hmm. He upped the stakes, and then Return of the Jedi had Ewoks. I don't know, like he tried to create another thing, and then he waited that 15 years or so to create the prequels, and the prequels again he's like, I'm gonna do all CG, I'm gonna change the game again, I'm just gonna keep pushing the envelope and creating a new world. So George Lucas gets all of my respect for his ambition, but the execution maybe not so much, but the ambition and the ingenuity and the ideas, it's all there, and he's such a genius. And then you've got the sequel trilogy, which, like you said, it's just this recycled pastiche of Star Wars throughout the decades. And you're just like, what happened? What happened to that pushing of the envelope? I mean, JJ tried to do some new things in the movies. I mean, he incorporated Carrie Fisher in the most recent episode in a way that we hadn't really seen before, posthumously. But still, like the levels at which I thought was a pretty gracious nod to Carrie Fisher, but I don't feel like these sequels were trying to reform cinema like George Lucas always sets out to do. and that's where I think it, and that is why it fails, and that is why it fails. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think what's missing also is the story. There's something to be said about Star Wars coming at the end of the civil rights movement. There's that, Darth Vader and that whole the stormtroopers kind of represent Nixon and like this whole political ideology, and you're the rebel, you're up against it, we're going to defeat them, and then it complicates things further where they say, well, I'm your father, like this whole evil thing. It's part of your legacy. What are you going to do about it? And he chops off his hand too. It's like super symbolic. I love it. But yeah, that kind of, what is the story now with Rey, and like what is the story? Like what are we up against?
The most strongest. She's the strongest ever, and she becomes the strongest ever.
She's trying to find her lineage. Then her lineage turns out to be, oh, you're nobody, or you're somebody. You're super important. You're Palpatine. So it's like, okay, where's the thing that we as the audience are supposed to get as the parallel for our lives? I think that's when movies really, like Matrix, we brought up at the top of this, it parallels our lives. We're like, oh shit, we're batteries, dude. We're like trapped in the Matrix and such.
We're so stuck like in the machine.
It gives you a new, like, it's unfortunate, but that term red pill has been co-opted and sort of taken from that. But it gives you a terminology now to describe something. And I think these new movies, what do they give you? The same thing with these. I think Zack Snyder is trying to make important films, but it's so muddied is the word, I guess, visually and
I think that's also a very important thing that George Lucas, like you're saying, he puts contextually his movies in the world we're living in and reflects the world we're living in, because that's what artists do. And he's in, like, you'll even look at Revenge of the Sith, he's using all of the verbs, the verbiage that we were hearing in the media about going to war. Like that movie is so paralleled. It's 2004 or 5. And we were going into Afghanistan, we're going into Iraq, and they're talking about that symbolically in that movie, and on so many levels. So if you're not with me, you're against me. Like these kinds of terms. And George Lucas was always aware of that, and JJ.
And to bring it to that point, what movies were big right before that? Lord of the Rings, right? The Two Towers and all that. Those came out at around 9/11 and such. So, and what is that as a rallying cry for war? Like, come together, let's defeat this enemy together. So very problematic stuff there. Like, I love Lord of the Rings, don't get me wrong. I could spend forever immersed in that kind of world. But I'm also glad that Witcher came around and is now promising to make spin-offs of that kind of world, because the major difference is The Witcher is treated like basically like a person of color. He's treated like an outsider. He's a mutant, so you're seeing it from his perspective as opposed to like being the hero or whatever, or the number one, or so I like that. And as far as like Lord of the Rings goes, I think it's just like after we've seen the Hobbit movies, and it's like, okay, we've got enough of that. Like, we've seen that now. You did a great job, Peter. Hanging up.
The Hobbits is like 7.5 hours of rolling down a river in a barrel. That's what I remember.
Have you ever seen these talking about Star Wars and Hobbit? Have you seen these the cuts, the fan cuts that they've done of these movies? So there's a Hobbit 3-hour cut that takes the 3 movies and condenses it to a 3-hour movie.
I haven't seen that. Is it good?
I think it's called To There and Back Again, and it was once available at as sort of a download, like torrent sort of deal. They made it right as the third installment had come out in theaters. So even like the copy I had was the third version was like a bootleg. So those scenes from the third are just like shitty quality, but they managed to like delete all the loves. But as far as the fan cut of Star Wars, the prequels, have you seen that one? That was supposedly done by Topher Grace.
I did watch that back in the day. That was like 10 years. That was a while ago.
Yeah,
too.
That was a long
the Phantom
time ago.
Edit, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah. Topher Grace.
And then that, interestingly, that one focused on the love story more than I thought it would. But I guess that you had to sort of add some sort of character development. So like, why not focus on the love story?
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense.
I always feel like the prequels kind of really missed. They whiffed on the fact that they could have made this compelling love triangle, I think, between the Queen and, say, like Obi-Wan
Right. Yeah.
and Anakin, and there could have been this jealousy and this anger that Anakin, this rage that he developed over time, and you could see why he'd come to, because I mean they're all people, and there could have been like this interpersonal connection that perhaps, you know, he was wrongly accusing Obi-Wan of or being jealous, and just his poisoned mind from the dark side made him lash out in such ways. And then I always thought that if they showed that in the prequels, say like a love triangle between Obi-Wan, Amidala, and Anakin, and left it vague, maybe showed her pregnant at the end of episode 3, and maybe Obi-Wan is there to support her after defeating Anakin. So we maybe assume that maybe Obi-Wan is the dad. We don't know. We don't quite know who the father of... We don't even know if it's twins yet, which I think would keep the continuity and the surprise once you get to episode 4, when Luke sees Obi-Wan in the desert, and he's like, Uncle Ben, who's my dad? I don't know. And we're kind of, as an audience, after watching the first 3, going, is Obi-Wan his dad? Like, who is this guy? Like, and then when we find out that Darth Vader, you know, spoilers, guys, Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father. Well, yeah, when we find that out, I feel like that would have had a massive impact, because we were like, oh snap, like he's the dad, and it wasn't Obi-Wan. So, but the way George Lucas, I just think, struck out, he wasn't. I don't know what he was thinking.
He wasn't telling a story like that. He was trying to tell lore. He was trying to like, and then this happened, and then 300 years later, you know, it's like, it's kind of, he's got a lore in his head, and he just needs to get the order of events out primarily before he tells the story. It's not like, you know, I prefer stories that are written as an experience. You know, it's like, it as a watcher, it's more immersive. It's like, oh, okay, I'm here, I'm experiencing a thing, I'm seeing people. That's why Tarantino is so good, is he puts you in an experience. He doesn't explain what cabin you're in or who this guy is that's walking the door. They're just having a conversation. It's a compelling, interesting conversation. There's a lot of emotion in it, and again, like but instead it's like, George Lucas's version is like, okay, here's this thing. They're visiting this planet because of this trade disagreement that's happening, and it's like, who cares, man? You know, just put me in the desert. But I show me something on the screen. Again, here's the Mandalorian, you know, coming back and showing it why it's so good. It's just like immersive. You're there. You're saturated. You feel the sand. You know, it's hitting you in the face. It's like there's no time for that in these bigger movies where there's so much happening. They have to get out, you know? Yeah. So it's a different, but I like these big movies too. Don't get me wrong. I like grand sort of, but I think the perfect balance of that is something like Jurassic Park, because it's a grand thing that's happening, the creation of this park and the exploit, you know, and what the complications of that and chaos theory or whatever. But you're really still just experiencing these people going to visit a park, and then shit goes down, you know? So it's still an experience while still having an overarching, they just show you something interesting.
Jurassic Park just literally being 2 hours of scientists in labs in pipettes just creating clones.
Imagine it was all that one raptor scene. It's just in the lab, and then they were just explaining it.
And now we put and then we use the gene splicing method, and then we use the centrifuge over here. Like, it's like, guys, we want to see dinosaurs already.
Yeah, like reading the book was like that. There's like whole chapters devoted to chaos theory, which, you know, as an adult now I find interesting, because I actually read the book by James Gallick or something called Chaos that was based on that. Like that guy is who Crichton based Malcolm on, or loosely. Yeah. The guy's not exactly a rock star, but the chaos-ticians or whatever, as far as the bomb they dropped on science has made them kind of like rock stars. So I think that's where that comes from. But Crichton's he wrote some interesting things. I remember I'd read Timeline and saw that movie and was super disappointed in that.
Yeah, and Sphere was, the movie wasn't so great. The book's pretty good. I did read Jurassic Park and Lost World and Sphere and several Crichton books, which were which are such great ideas, scientific ideas integrated into a story about people that are dealing with those situations.
He was so good at balancing it because like his science in his books is science. It's straight up like and the research, historical research he put into timeline, like he really in that book he really like stresses how devastating arrows were. Like to have a cloud of arrows descending upon your army like
Oh,
from
geez.
100 miles away, or not 100 miles, but you know, like from a distance is like a game-changing technique as far as warfare is concerned. He really, but the movie doesn't touch upon that hardly at all, so you don't really get that level of but then again, would that communicate on film? I don't know. That's a whole
Yeah.
nother discussion book too. The next time I come on your show, let's do the unless you've done this already, but the book to film movies like Fight Club, for instance.
What's it? What book is that?
Fight
Oh,
Club, you know, like how it was
like
a
the book, the
first.
adaptation from the book to
Right.
the.
Like,
Yeah, that's actually a great subject, and
yeah.
I will definitely save that one for the next time
Yeah.
that you're on. And I think Jurassic Park is a great example of that too, because game changing in movies for sure. Like we never saw a dinosaur before that we really believed, and also Superman. You mentioned Superman the movie. You'll believe a man could fly. I liked that he was suspended by wires, but I remember I had a friend I grew up with. She laughed every time she saw Superman fly because she was like, "Look, he's just on wires," and I'm like, but he's really like coming down. He's really like being suspended."
The thing that bugged me was that his suit was slightly green because they had to use a blue screen back then. So like
Oh,
they gave
right.
him a suit that's slightly green. Yeah,
Yeah.
not quite blue.
Oh, that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Now that I think
Or
of it.
either that or they discolored it or something, or they did something to it. But yeah, you can see in those flying scenes that suit looks a little less powdery blue. Yeah. But yeah, that's as far as like Fight Club is, for instance. I met that author. I was working at a bookstore in New York when that movie came out, and the author Chuck Palahniuk, I'd read his books then, came in and he's like, when I first met him, he looked like a member of Nine Inch Nails or something. Like he was like a grunge guy. He was like wearing like army fatigue pants and like a black shirt and like long grungy stringy hair, and he was pissed. I was just like talking to him, and I'm like, so yeah, I just saw him. I really liked the book. I like the book better than the movie. And he's like, yeah, right. If David Fincher was here, you'd probably say the opposite to him. I was like,
You're right.
okay, dude. But you know, when you read about his life, you realize like at that time when I met him, he had just like had to identify his dad's body because
Oh,
his
good
dad's
God.
girlfriend's ex-boyfriend kidnapped his dad and her girl and the girlfriend and like tortured them and then set them on fire or whatever. So like as as that movie's doing really well, he has to go identify his dad's body, so he's pissed off. But then the next time I met him was like years later, and by then he had written Choke, which was doing really well, or another book, and he was a completely different person. He was wearing a pink
Right.
shirt tucked into khakis. His hair was like cut shorts. You know, he was super nice, like really nice. So
He
there
wasn't
was a
going
whole
through stuff.
transformation. Yeah.
That's crazy. That's a crazy story. I just one last thing on Fincher. We were talking about animation and how we're gonna watch movies in the future, and like there's like lots of deep fakes on the internet, which I've been watching, which are crazy. Like the Jim Carrey as the Joker, as Joaquin. It's just uncanny and bizarre how they were able to do this with like adversarial networks and computing and stuff like that. But going back to Benjamin Button, David Fincher, and how you were saying animation is this art form where you can tell stories and emotion. I was convinced while watching Benjamin Button, when they were taking Brad Pitt's face, that they were definitely adjusting his performance and using different takes. And Fincher's actually known for that. He'll do 50 takes and times. And also George Lucas did that in the prequels. There's moments where he just literally morphs one take into another, and you can actually see like a little like slightly weird movement in say like Hayden Christensen. You see like the actual morph as far as Benjamin Button, which looked very photorealistic, but the emotions that and in the moments were definitely edited, I think, through the animation team. Which, by the way, just to kind of stack on top of that, motion capture, I think, should get an Oscar category, but for motion capture team. I think the actor, the performer, and the animators and the unit that produces that should be nominated. There should be like a motion performance team or
Yeah.
house that gets the award
Just
for that.
just give Andy Serkis the award every year. That's
Exactly.
what all it's going to be. But yeah,
He
no, I
changes
love it.
them.
I got to do a little motion capture with full screen because we toyed with it a little bit,
Oh,
and I
that's
got to
awesome.
wear a little bit of a gimmick, a little suit, and do some like movements. And it as you know, and again, like this kind of stuff, and what you're talking about, like tweaking Brad Pitt's performance is what would Brando have said? It's but it's as a storyteller, when you want to convey something very specific and you know exactly what you want, it's like, oh man, yeah, it's deadly. And if you're the kind of person who does your own kind of stuff, or gets heavily involved, because there's a lot of, sometimes directors don't know animation, or they know direction, but and they don't know what you're capable of as far, and what you're not capable of as far as animation is concerned. So there's like this, a person who knows the medium really well and knows how, like, it's just a perfect example is that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse movie. It was so fantastic.
Yeah.
And one interesting thing I loved about that one is they removed frames. So they went with, I think they ended up going with 12 frames per second for that one, which is what gives it that kind of stop motionally look. And I remember early on in animation, one of the things they would do, it's like sometimes it was too fluid, and that kind of gives it a cheap feel. A similar thing happens with like the Hobbit films. They had released one in 48 frames. I don't know if you saw that in the theaters.
I saw one of them in that crazy
yeah
format,
and it gives it that sort of, it feels like you're on a set, or it looks like British television or something like that, because I think British television had more frames, so it kind of like just 30, you see more movement. So, and video games have 30 to 60 frames per second, so that is part of it too. But it goes to show that taking frames out of something actually creates a whole nother level of interesting stuff going on there, and it improved the animation one, even though these characters are still just as emotive as any previous or Pixar type film. I think that one slight innovation, also adding clip art, 2D art, keyframes here or there, that be just like one moment of a frame, and just show this piece of art, that kind of broke it up a bit, or gave it something of a different new style to it. But again, everyone loved that movie, right? I mean, like, it's pretty much. Did you see that Into the Spider-Verse?
I did. I really liked it, actually.
Yeah, isn't it a fantastic film? So, like,
great
yeah,
story,
I mean,
great visual style, and told in a cool way. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff.
Definitely. I think we covered so much good stuff here
Oh,
with
man,
Video Village, with Shy, with Blurred Words says, I thought they changed frames per second at various times in that flick. I'm not quite sure.
Oh, maybe they did. That's true. Maybe they did it for some of the action scenes, or certainly you could see it in one of the first scenes of the movie when he's in his chair, kind of like dancing it. You can sort of notice the choppiness of it. But yeah, some of the action scenes, maybe they removed frames there. But
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just thinking about the movie, and it did feel like a comic book come to life. Particularly.
Yeah.
And thank you guys, Aeon Alita. I think I've pronounced that correctly. Thank you for phonetically showing me how to say that. Aeon Alita, Ron Perty, Candyland, everybody who joins us every day. Thank you guys so much. Mallon, tell us where we can find you. And I'd definitely love to have you back on, because I think this discussion could go on for days and days. And so we should save some for next time.
Yeah. And we can totally do, if you're allowed to do this on your show. I know you make the rules, right? You can maybe talk about music sometimes, because
yes,
now that you don't have that outlet, so let's bring some music in here. I'll be your music guy too. But yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to talk to someone finally. Not that I haven't talked.
The thing about this, guys, Mallon lives like 3 blocks that way. It's the most hilarious format, but we should make this definitely a regular thing. You're a great guest. We want to find you on your platforms. Mallon
on Twitter
_con.
most of the time. Most of the time you can find me on Twitter. So Mallon_.com, or you can go to my website, malloncon.com, or conimation.net. Same website, and you can see some of my art, my animations, my music, my books, or whatever, peruse.
All of the things. The omnipotentiate. I forgot what was it called?
I'll take that too.
Yeah. There's also a great TED Talk that Taika Waititi does, and it's incredible in it. And I think people like you and myself can definitely relate to his path of being like drawing and doodling at some point, to the point where you can sort of create your own little comics, and then getting an interest in music, and then developing musical skills. And as an artist or multi-hyphenated, you kind of appreciate and navigate the world in that way. Like you kind of see how things work, and then you try to make them yourself, like kind of
and you can cross pollinate too. It's cross disciplinary, multidisciplinary. So, you know, for instance, being a voice actor, I was also informed by being a singer in a band. So, you know, having melody to your voice is integral to voice acting. So, better screenwriter, because I understand the medium a little bit too. So I'm not just coming up with ideas, I'm seeing them presented. So that's why I think it's been a benefit for me, and I keep doing it. I keep delving deeper into each art form patiently, you know, because you can only go at a certain speed. But, and again, cross-pollinating and saying, what have I learned from honing my ear? What can that tell me about my eye? You know, it's interesting stuff. And I think art in general, creativity is being part of being human. And I know there are people out there who don't think I'm not a creative person. It's like, it's practice. You know, like I joked the other day, I tweeted the other day, something along the lines of like people go, oh, why you're so talented? And it's like, well, I can't swim. So like there's trade-offs, you know.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I focused on this area and I didn't focus on that area. So
yeah, I spent more time practicing the bass guitar than I did at calculus, for instance, in high school.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah, right. We're not so great at math, but we can kill it visual storytelling.
There's only so much time in the day.
Exactly. So. But life is long, and if you pursue the arts and just do it just for the sake of it, it just days, months, weeks go by, and all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, I'm pretty good. It's just because you weren't trying to be good because you want to be that thing in the industry. You're doing it because it feeds your soul. It's part of becoming better, part of using your imagination. And so much of our reality comes out of our imagination. Learn how to. It's like a house where we're only using the one room in psychedelic experience or something. But just play with your creativity a little bit, and I think it makes you a better person, or at least a more rounded person, or open-minded. I don't know, something different.
Well, amen to that. I mean, people when they say they're not a creative person, I'm like, you just created a sentence. Like, you just strung words together and told me a story about yourself that you're telling yourself, which everything's a story. Everything is our truth is what we tell ourselves every day. So like, if we change that story, you can create your new path.
I was asked those people like, oh, you're not a creative person. Well, do you ever experience anxiety? Well, yeah. Well, there you go. That's being creative. You're like sitting there. There's no danger around, but you're thinking of possibilities of what's going to go wrong because you're creating scenarios in your mind. So it's like you're using that imagination, but you're using it to scare yourself instead of, I don't know, create something that doesn't exist, or have an idea and then try to manifest it, however crudely, just that practice of taking something inside your brain that's amorphous, essentially just a collection of neurons. That's all it is. An idea is a couple of neurons or a bunch of neurons firing at once, hyperpinning two ideas together and going, hey, I never thought of that. Has anyone ever thought of that? And then you kind of make it into reality, or you see an image and you try to make it into reality, or you don't think of anything at all and you just let your emotions come out and create some sort of weird abstract thing that doesn't make sense, but only to you, because you're like, that's what I feel. You know, like that's honest too. It's amazing. Okay, you're right. We can keep talking forever. We got to stop the show at some point.
I know. Oh, it's good. It's good. I think people really enjoyed it. We're getting lots of positive comments about your appearance. Thank you, Mallon, for all of your insight. This is awesome. This is a great conversation. I'd love to have you back anytime. And I hope you have... I'm going to eat lunch now. I'm going to make one of them temporary sandwiches.
Good idea. Yeah, I'm going to create something beautiful and destroy it. So exactly. Sounds like a good idea.
And on that note, thank you guys for watching.
Make sure you make it look neat and nice, like as a photograph of a sandwich.
Zen Buddhist monk type of activity or practice. Yes. Well, guys, thank you guys so much for joining us. This has been too much fun. Too much fun. We got to stop it now. And,
Criminal.
I'm Aristotle, Full Throttle. Your bro in the know with the fro. And I'll see you guys tomorrow.